Okay, to cut all of our Dresden blades, we are going to be using this Dresden ruler. It's Easy Quilting by Darlene Zimmerman, and this particular wedge shape is 18 degrees. So that means we would need 20 blades. So I've chosen 5 colors, 2 shades of each color, so a total of 10, and then we're going to cut 2 units from each fabric to give us our 20 blades. Now, if you don't have this Dresden set, but maybe you have a different one, and just check the degrees on it, and it has to equal 360 degrees to get a full circle. So if it's a little bit bigger, you may only need 16 wedges. But with the particular ruler that I'm using, it is an 18 degree, and we're going to use 20 blades. And to cut this, I have a strip that I've cut 5 inches, and I'm going to line up my cut ends at the 7.5 line and the 2.5 line. So I'm just going to position that on there. Here's the 7.5 line across the top, the 2.5 line here at the bottom. I do have this double, so there's 2 layers, and then I'm going to cut on each side. And it's not a good idea to cut away from you, but that's what I did. Okay, so then we have 2 pieces that will go into our block. And then to cut the next one for a later month, you can just simply rotate your ruler. So now the 7.5 is at the bottom and the 2.5 is at the top. And make a cut, and then you have those pieces ready to go. So go ahead and do that with all of your Dresden blades. Okay, I have all my Dresden blades cut, so I'm ready to go ahead and sew them together. And so to start off, you're going to take your unit, and there is a wider side and a narrower side. You're going to fold that in half, and we're going to be working with the longer, the wider edge. So just fold that in half, right sides together, and then we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam across the top there. Okay, and I'm just going to go one after the other, just kind of chain piece them. Again, I'm folding right sides together, and then, or folding them in half, right sides together along that wide edge, and we're just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so now I have a long chain of these funny looking things. So let's cut them apart, and then we're going to head to the pressing area. Okay, at the pressing station, I have my point turner, and your ruler may have come with one. I like this one by Clover. And what you're going to do then is take your blade that's still kind of right sides together, and I like to just put my thumb in to the little pocket there, push it all the way to the fold, that crease there. I'm going to, with my finger, then press this seam allowance kind of to one side, and then I'm just going to flip that. And so hopefully my seam allowances stayed to one side. And then I'm going to take my point turner and just kind of poke it through to punch that out and make it nice and pointy. Okay, and then I'm just going to kind of shift this so that the seam is nice and straight up and down. And then I'm going to take my iron and just give it a press. And then there is the completed blade, ready to attach to all of its other friends here. So I'll do that a couple more times. Again, I'm just sticking my thumb in there, pressing the seam to one side, poking it, or flipping it kind of onto itself there. I'm going to poke out that seam there so I have a nice point. I'm making sure that the seam is lined up nice, straight, up and down, and then press. Okay, and then we're going to do that to all the blades. Okay, I do have a tip for you if you don't like all of the bulk in that point up there. Because our seam allowance, we just kind of pushed it to one side. What you can do is, this is my crease here, and now I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to angle it and cut. I'm not going to cut on the stitches, but I'm just cutting like a little piece off there like that. Kind of 45-degree angle, little, just clipping off the straight edge of that seam. And then when I turn it and poke it out, you don't have quite as much bulk in there. So it's just another step if you want to do it. I'm okay with, I don't mind that it's a little bulky up there, but it is flatter if you kind of cut that seam a little bit. So I'll show it again on here, and I'm not getting into the stitches. I'm above the stitches in the seam allowance, and I'm just cutting that little, just clipping that at a 45-degree angle, and then that just eliminates some of that in the point. So it's up to you however you want to do it. Okay, poke it out and then press them flat, just like that. Okay, I have all of my wedges here, and now I'm going to sew them together in sets of two, groups of two. So I've kind of arranged a layout that I like with the colors, and it's your quilt, so go ahead and, you know, arrange them however you would like. So I do want these two next to each other, and so right now I've just put them side by side, and then I'm going to put them right sides together, and I am lining up this folded edge as well as this side here. This side here is where we're actually going to be doing our stitching. It is going to be the folded edge down to this narrow edge is where we're making our 1/4 inch seam. But it is important that you line it up. So it's more important that they meet up here at the fold as opposed to down here. If they're a little off, that doesn't matter because this is all going to get covered up with our applique circle. So lining up these top folded areas. And what I like to do is I start stitching a little bit inside of where that fold is. I'm going to stitch about 2 times, do a reverse and reverse back to kind of stitch off of the fabric, and then continue stitching straight back down. There's a lot of stress at that join up there, and so a little back stitch right there is going to help reinforce that seam and hold it together. Okay, and then I'm just going to take that out. So I back stitched it right there, and then when I open that up, I have a really nice edge here. Everything looks exactly like it's supposed to. So we're going to sew those into groups of 2. And again, I'm lining up this folded edge as well as this side edge here. And I'm really paying attention to that my folds line up there. And then I'm going to stitch along that side. And this is also a critical step. You really want this to be a 1/4 inch seam, because that adds up. It's part of our measurement that these are all going to come together in a circle that lays nice and flat. So just check each one. That one isn't quite right to the edge, but it's okay. It's good enough. We're going to come back through and applique that down, and then where we applique it, it's going to fill in some of that. So I'm okay with that. And then I'm just going to keep continuing lining these up and sewing along that edge there. And you can chain piece them. I just kind of like to check the first couple just to make sure that they look how I want them to. Okay. And then just continue that process. Okay, I'm just going to go press them, and you can press it open if you want, like that. That will help it lay nice and flat. And then you don't have any fabrics, you know, lots of bulk there at that seam. Or you can press it to one side. I think I'm just going to start with pressing it to one side and see how that goes. Okay, I've got them pressed, and I did just press to one side, and they're totally fine. You can kind of start to see the circle that's starting to take shape. And so then now I'm going to take 2 sets of 2 and join those together. So same thing, we're lining up that folded edge, and we're going to stitch right along that side. And I do back stitch at that top. And it is easier, I guess, if I cut that and take it apart so that I can start fresh on the next one a little bit in. So then my back stitches, I don't have a thread tail hanging out that's going to be showing. Then if I'm starting a little bit in and then backing up and coming down, I don't have my thread tails down in here. It's not sticking out up there. So yeah, that seems to be working good. So we'll just keep going all the way around, just joining smaller increments together. Okay, so I got that group is half, and I'll press that one, and then I'm going to join this one. And you can see they kind of get cumbersome after when we have lots of them joined. So that's why it's easier to do smaller increments and then gradually add them together into bigger groups. Okay, I'm going to give those two a press, and then we'll join our halves. Okay, I have this half laid out and this half as well. And so now I will just put those right sides together onto each other like that. And then the same thing, I'm just going to stitch there, and then they will be joined in a circle at that point. So get them all lined up. Okay, and so there is our full circle, and I'll just give that a press, and then that's ready to go. Okay, here we have our Dresden ring all pieced together, and I have the background fabric that is cut an inch bigger than what we're going to need, and then I've drawn a square the size that we're actually going to trim it down to. I like it a little bit bigger before we applique in case it does draw in a little bit, because, you know, all the stitches that we're going to put in here to applique it down, whether you're doing it by machine or hand. So in order to keep the dimensions the size that we want it to be, we make it a little bit bigger, and then we can trim it down once we've got all of our stitches on there. So there's several different ways you can line this up. So what I have done is when I drew that square, I made a mark where there's the halfway points vertically and the horizontally and vertically on the half. Then I've also kind of folded it on that, and it kind of gave me a little crease where those middle sections are. So that's just going to help with centering. And with the Dresdens, there's different ways you can line it up. This one, the way that I have it laid out here is a point. The furthest point on the blade is touching the halfway point on all 4 sides. So that's one way that you can lay it out, and then you can work on getting it centered. So to center it, you know, you're going to just kind of like keep flattening it, smoothing it to get it all laying flat. And the other way that you can turn it is to put the valley, the inner point, at the halfway mark. So the choice is up to you. You can do whichever way you prefer. There's plenty of room. It's going to fit whichever way you choose. And then another thing to think about is there a certain color that you want, like at the top or at the bottom? You know, you can turn it any way that you want to get your colors oriented in a pleasing manner. So I don't think there's a bad choice. They all look pretty good. And you can decide if you want them all to be the exact same layout for each block that we're going to do, if they're all facing the same way on the blocks. So some things to think about. But when you get it positioned to where you like it, then we're going to get it ready to applique. And to do that, I am just going to go ahead and pin. So we're going to be appliquing along the outer edges. And so I am going to just kind of smooth, and I'm going to put pins in it so that the sharp point is facing the point of the blade, so that I'm not going to maybe unpin it as I'm stitching, but that head of the pin isn't going to get in my way when I'm in my presser foot as I'm going around. So once I get it all smooth, and then I'll just kind of go around and pin like different sections in place. So I've got one kind of on each side, and then I may go back and I'll probably pin like every other blade, or just put, you know, enough pins to hold it. You could also glue baste it down if you wanted to. I just like the pins. And then I'm going to do a blanket stitch for my applique, but you can choose to hand stitch the applique. You can do a straight stitch, like a quarter of an, or an eighth of an inch in. You could do a zigzag stitch all the way around. And you also can choose a thread color that's fun. I think I'm just gonna do a white thread color that kind of matches the background. And I'm going to do a blanket stitch all the way around. So now that we have this done, we're ready to go ahead and stitch. Now I have the machine set up to do a blanket stitch, and I am going to use an open toe foot so I can see where my needle is and where it's positioned to the actual piece of the Dresden blade that I'm trying to catch, and also the background fabric. I want to just do like a straight stitch that goes along the background, and then where it jumps over to make the ladder stitch is where it's going to check or catch that Dresden blade. So to start, again, I'm just going to kind of hold my threads, and I'm starting kind of in a valley, just not at the exact point, like I'm coming up just a little bit. And I'm checking my stitch. I think I want to increase it a little bit more of a ladder. I want the stitch that's going into the blade a little bit deeper. There we go. And then I'm just going to kind of go slow, take your time. And I'm stitching up to the point. And then I've got to the tip of the point, and then I do have my needle to stop down, and I'm going to just lift up my presser foot, and then I know my next stitch is going to be a ladder, and so I can kind of position that where I want the stitch to go, and then just continue down the side of that blade. And then when I get close to the middle part of the valley there, I'm going to just kind of manipulate it so that it does a stitch kind of in that valley. And then coming back out through the side, getting ready to go up to the next point. Okay, I'm coming up to the part where I started right there. Okay, that's where I started, and now I'm just going to overlap about 3 or 4 stitches just going past, and then I'm going to pull up my needle and pull out so that I have a long tail of thread. And then what I like to do is I'm going to bring that top thread to the back. Sometimes you can just pull on the bobbin thread here. And that one's not going to work. Oh, this one did. Okay, so then I'm going to pull the top thread to the back, and then I'm just going to put a little knot right there just to secure my stitches. I don't ever want to have them come undone or have to go back and redo any stitches, so I'm just going to tie tie it into a knot and clip my ends. And then that's how I'm going to finish it. So I'm going to get a needle and pull that other one through, and then we'll be ready to add the center part. Okay, I have my appliqued Dresden blades here, and I am going to remove these pins. I want to make sure I get all of those out from where it was being held to the backing so I could do the applique. And now I'm going to put my centered circle block onto my Dresden, and we're going to have to try to center that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of take this circle block and fold it in half, and then I can kind of get an idea. I'm going to lay that up here against. Now I went with the valleys of the blades where my center line is, and so then I know that this seam and this seam are the center, so I can kind of just nudge that up there. And it looks like it's about a little bit more than a ½ inch on each side, so it's equal on both sides, so I like how that looks. And then I'm going to open it up, and I'm just going to kind of peek up here and down here, making sure the center of my block is then centered with that seam. And another check that you can do to see that you've got it centered is to just take a ruler, and I am measuring from the edge of my circle to the outer point of the Dresden blade, and I'm at 4 inches. So I can check a couple of those all the way around, and then if it's not quite right, I can nudge it in a different direction to just kind of help get it centered. And it's really, really close, so I'm not going to be super concerned. I feel like it's lined up pretty good, and it looks straight on my block. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Then I'm going to go back through, and now I am going to kind of gently put my hand underneath the fabric of the blades, the Dresden blades, and put a pin in there. And again, I'm just putting it so that the head of my pin is towards this center of my block, because when I'm appliquing, I don't want to get my presser foot caught up in that, or my needle or anything as I'm going along. So I'm just going to go around and put a few pins in place, just holding that there. And I'm just trying to keep it as flat as possible. And I'm going to move that a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to put a few more just because I do not want it to shift. Okay, and then one more over here. Okay, so there I have it neatly pinned into place. Now one thing, there is about a little bit more than a ½ inch of each of these blades that are underneath of the circle. And that may be more than what you'd like. If you want to, you could go in there and trim away a little bit of that. I'm okay with having it that far behind it. That way I know that it's not going to the blade is not going to come unstitched or pop out or anything. I know that I have good coverage of the circle around it. So once I get that positioned and I'm happy with that, then I'm ready to go ahead and do the applique stitch around the circle. Okay, I've got my blanket stitch set up again, and I'm just gonna go ahead. I don't really care where I start on the circle. I just am kind of in a side over here, and I'm just gonna start stitching, and I'll work my way all the way around the circle. And it's a gentle circle, so it's kind of turning a little bit on its own, like it's just a gentle. I'm not really having to stop too much and lift the presser foot and readjust. Just taking my time going along. Okay, I'm getting close to where I started. So I'm just continuing around. And I'm just going to overlap about 3 or 4 stitches, over stitch where I started. And then I'm just going to again cut some longer tails here. And I will pull that back thread or the top thread to the back. And that one came pretty good. And then I'm going to tie a knot in that also, clip my tail, and then I'm not worried about that stitching coming out ever, ever, ever. Okay, there we go. And I'll go ahead and do that other one. And then the Dresden is all stitched on. Okay, I have my block. It is oversized, so we're going to trim it down. And we're trimming it down to 18.5 inches. So half of 18.5 is 9.25. So I'm going to kind of position this so that my halfway marks are going to be on a line. Here at the bottom, I'm using my mat then to match up a line at the top of that. And then I am going to count over 9.25. Okay, and then I'm going to put my ruler on that line. And then I strongly recommend at this point just drawing a line with this ruler. So I already have a line drawn and it matches up, so I'm going to draw a line again, going by the theory that we're going to measure twice and cut once. So we don't want to, I like to visually see all my lines, make sure it's a square, that everything's straight. And then when I'm satisfied, go ahead and cut it off. Then we know we've got it accurately done. So I'm just going to do that same process on all 4 sides so I can turn it, line up my center again on a line on my mat. And if you have a 18.5 inch ruler, you can just set that on top there. Again, I'd probably just mark it all off to make sure that we're equidistant away, and then go ahead and trim. So I can count over and line up my ruler with my mat. And I'm going to draw a line, and I'm going to do that on all 4 sides. And then I'm going to come back with my rotary cutter and go ahead and just trim that off where my lines are. And then I know that I'll have a perfectly squared block. Okay, and I'll just go ahead and do all 4 sides. Okay, I've added my Dresden block next to our month 1 block on the design wall, and it's looking really fun. Happy sewing. Thanks for watching.